So recently, community has been a lot of talk about 6v6 versus 5v5, which I think it's interesting that discussion around the game has boiled down to this in a lot of ways. Because I think there's a bit more nuance to why people got to this. Because obviously there's issues with both versions of the game. But I think especially with 5v5 right now, we're in a really weird state. Because after season like Season 9, a lot changed, which in hindsight seems really to not be for the better. Because now we're hearing comments, especially from the dev team, that like they're gonna go back on some of the changes, like some of the health, which obviously makes me ask questions like, well, why do we increase health in the first place? But anyway, an interesting correlation you can notice is that also a lot of the 6v6 talk has gotten very popular after something like Season 9, because it really threw a lot of Overwatch's game feel out of whack, which of course people's feeling of this isn't gonna be great, because they like the feel of Overwatch. But I can see a lot of people now start to tie the old game feel of Overwatch specifically to 6v6, which I think is very interesting. It kind of creates this mindset that 5v5 has never worked, even though arguably just a few seasons ago it was working really well, which I think is a good place to start. What happened to the current state of 5v5? So, obviously, as mentioned earlier, one of the biggest changes we got recently was the global health increase, which has very much slowed down the game in some aspects, which has made some heroes start to struggle in ways they didn't before. So it really feels like they're lacking their own identity in the game they used to have. The example you see a lot recently is heroes like Hanzo and Junkrat, because they lost their very consistent burst damage combo they had to eliminate enemies, which obviously, since they had that combo for now, it's been like 8 years, it's not really going to feel great that it's just gone. And I think a similar ripple effect has happened to other heroes in different weird ways. And I think another two elephants we have in this room is stuff like the DPS passive. That passive's issue really has been the fact it's made a lot of the supports less interesting, because it hits a lot of the supports in very different ways. Because first of all, the goal of the passive was to decrease how much a support could burst heal. But the issue is that the heroes that can burst heal are still the same heroes, and the heroes that can't just don't really do anything anymore with healing. So we just have this group of supports that just feel worse and basically got no help, and this group of supports that kind of feel worse but are still the best supports in the game. So it really limited what support players could even pick, which that just sucks to see. Because I think rather than doing the DPS passive, they should just have looked at the problem supports and think, what should this problem support role actually be? So we don't accidentally throw these other supports into the meat grinder for the sake of nerfing the problem supports. And then secondly, another issue the DPS passive creates. And then, at least to me for what I've noticed, I think the DPS passive is also why health got increased. Because it works weird with effective health, since effectively you have 20% less health when you're shot by a DPS. Which about 20% of the current health pool that at least the squishy heroes have is like 200. But that also means it affects characters like the tank heroes even more. Because 20% less than their current health is less than they had before. So that then creates the issue that the tanks feel less tanky, which is really insane to say, because from a numbers standpoint, they have more health, but from effective health standpoint, they got less, which is just kind of confusing to play around that. And obviously, it feels really bad for the tank player. So this passive just kind of feels like it exists to give the tank role and the support role a harder time, rather than actually fixing any of the issues that either role has. Like, I'm gonna mention it again, but the best DPS passive so far was just the passive movement speed, because it gave the role something interesting that all roles didn't have. And it was only used in like beta 1, which is so insane to me, because it was so interesting and fun. Which like, it did still create other problem heroes, but I'm of the opinion I think it's fine, because the passive doesn't exist just to give tanks and support a hard time for basically no reason, except the fact that they can't be bothered to like deal with their problem supports. So, with this prefaced, I think it's easy to see why people think, well, the fix to this is just to get 6v6 back. Because to most people in their mind, 6v6 ended in a very specific state. But the thing is, if we get 6v6 back, it won't be in the state people remember. Which to me, I think that's great. Especially after playing that community-made game mode, which really used the new heroes and other new stuff in really fun, interesting ways in a 6v6 context. But my issue also, while playing that mode, is that I think I wasn't fully enjoying it because of 6v6, but because it got rid of a lot of the dumb stuff from stuff like Season 9. So I question, maybe people are accidentally framing wanting to get rid of the dumb changes from Season 9 as, oh, I want 6v6 back. Because, first of all, it's a faster, easier sell. And also, if people are really unhappy with the current state of the game, they want to go back to something they think they enjoyed more. Which is, it's a valid mindset to have, even though to me it can feel very flawed, because we miss our context to why we got here in the first place. Because the reality kinda was, people didn't really want to play tank back in the day. Like I loved the role. I loved most of the heroes in the role. But it was still the least popular role, which people really forget. Before stuff like role queue, people didn't really play 2 tanks. Normally you only had like one guy that would pick a tank. So people were still kind of solo tanking, but it was still a possibility that one of your teammates that have picked either support or DPS extra could swap to that tank and help you. While here in a forced solo tank environment, you're kinda out of luck, which I can get why that's frustrating, but I think it's better than what we used to have, because it kinda matters that the other roles get decent queue times. So it makes sense to cut back on the tank role. Though it does come up with a fun question like, oh, what would a 6v6 be like with a solo tank? Which we have kinda seen that with the really old 3-2-1 experiment they did, which ended up leading us into 5v5 with a solo tank, which I think that could almost be a really interesting thing to try. What would Overwatch 2 play as in 6v6, but with 1 tank, 2 supports, and 3 DPS? Because then rather than adding another tanky enemy to fight, you're then adding another squishy enemy to fight. But hey, that's just my quick random thoughts about all this 6v6 versus 5v5 stuff. Because in reality, I just think it kinda boils down to Season 9 was kinda bad. Because to me it did a lot of unnecessary changes to Overwatch's core. Because we need to remember, a lot of these heroes have had this same health pool for almost like 8 years. Which it's just going to feel worse when you change that out of nowhere. And in my opinion, change it without any purpose. Also, I really didn't expect to make a video talking about 6v6 versus 5v5, but it's interesting how big of a topic it became in the community, because people seem so frustrated right now, and they really can't figure out why, which I can't really blame most, because at the start of the year the game was really thrown into a weird state, so I'm assuming for a lot of people it really felt like this constant in their life was different for basically no reason. But anyway, that's it for me for now. If you have any opinions about this neat little debate people are having, please tell me in the comments, because I think it's really interesting to see what people have to say about this, even if a lot of people's opinions are very flawed in the way they want to look at it. Anyway, have a good one everyone.